Sherrill is an abundance of wealth of experience and information, and not just for Lobby Day, but those chapters when you're facing challenges and people have issues going on where you are in the district regarding the state government. You want to make sure that you reach out to your delegates that represent the areas in which your districts are. But if not, you're unable to get resolved, then we just ask that you pass that information on to the DR. And the DR will reach out to our office, and I'm sure my Chief of Staff, Cheryl Reddington, will connect them with the right resources. For today, we are virtual, as you know, and so we're going to kick this thing off, but we ask that all brothers mute yourselves, and there'll be the appropriate time in which the DR, Brother Conrad, or either the chair, Brother Fairchild, will recognize you and to allow you to ask a question or to speak, etc. The run of show, we have many delegates who are planning to be on with us this morning, and they have the times in which they will be hopping on, and we'll wrap it up around 10:30, 10:40, 10:45 time frame. I have made Cheryl the host of the meeting, Brother Conrad, as well as Brother Fairchild are co-hosts, and they will be charged with allowing people to enter virtually. Hopefully this thing will, we can get over this thing, and next year we'll return back to in-person, hopefully. That will be the case, and we look forward to hosting the brothers on next year. Thank you so much, Brother BR.
Thank you, Brother Hayes, and you kind of covered the agenda. We sent that out via email to everyone, so thank you all for joining. I will give my opening remarks, and then we'll move back to Brother Cliff Hayes and Brother Luke Torrin. And Cheryl, did you find out about Luke, when he's going to be available?
Unfortunately, no. His office door, Delegate Torian's office door is open, but Chief of Staff's door is closed, so I wasn't able to speak to him, unfortunately. And he's Delegate Torian is not in his office right now.
Okay, we will remain flexible. Okay, so good morning to all government officials, especially Brother Delegate Luke E. Torian and Brother Delegate C.E. Cliff Hayes Jr., all current and former Grand District and chapter officers and brothers of the 3rd District. I say hello on behalf of 43 chapters and 2,000 brothers, all protocol observed. You know, it is indeed an honor and a pleasure to join all of you for the 2022 Legislative Lobby Day in Virginia on Martin Luther King birthday for the 3rd District of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We have completed one of these annually for a while now. We'd like to thank Brother Hayes, Brother Torian, Brother Fairchild, and Cheryl, and Brother Hayes, and all others for planning this event and executing this event. Our theme for our district meeting set for March 31st to April 3rd, 2022 is Voting and Giving in 2022. It is important to us all. Today, we will focus on voting as part of our discussions and other topics that Delegate Hayes feels that are important to us to support. Brother Dr. David Marion, our 41st Grand Bassa, sends his greeting as well. Brother Ricky Lewis, our first Vice Grand Bassa, has joined us all the way from California, the warm side of town. Again, thanks for attending. God bless you, your families, the 3rd District, the birthplace of Omega, and Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Brother Hayes, Pi Gamma 87, I turn the mic back to you, good brother.
Thank you so much, Brother DR. And certainly this is exciting times for us here in the Virginia General Assembly. And there's much for us to be on the watch for with our diligence and with the brothers that we have across the 3rd District in your various vocations. There are all kind of issues, laws, policy, ordinances, et cetera, that we need to pay close attention to. There has been much advancement here in the last 2 years of the Virginia General Assembly in which we've been able to accomplish in the way of legislation and changing of the laws, many of which were fought for as long as I can remember. Omega has been on the forefront of undergirding many of those laws and many of those policies and many of those principles that we believe in as Omega Men has found its way into the Virginia Code, and we need to protect them. Unfortunately, brothers, this year, we're finding ourselves in a position in which many of those gains are threatened, and it looks like they will be challenged and trying to even roll them back. We know the truth is those who fail to remember their history and past are doomed to repeat it. And so we have to make sure that we know the truth, that we be vigilant and to be the enemy of anything that
military and
is
FBI
not.
forces. She was
Please
able to
mute
access
yourself,
firearms.
brother.
She
And to make sure that we are the enemy of any mendacity, anything that doesn't resemble truth in history, truth in education. We need to make sure that we are vigilant and fighting to make sure that the truth is told. And so some of the things that we're challenged with during this session that we're hearing are voting rights that have been obtained in the past couple of years. Voting has never been as easy as it is in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have now the ability to vote 45 days early in elections. We have the ability to vote on election day, November, the first Tuesday in November, as a holiday. Election day is a holiday here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have a right to show up at the polls and vote without many of the obstructions of the past. And as we look at the laws that are being introduced, many of them are trying to cross the street to make sure that they understand your position as members in the community, as members in the chapters where we represent, to say that voting, and the way for our democracy to work best is to get as much participation as possible. We believe in what the Johnson brothers wrote and lift every voice. Be in a situation where only some can be heard. So we need to make sure all of that is the case when it comes to participating in our democracy. In the way of education, and so we not only make sure that we are scholarly men and that we get educated ourselves, but we believe in a process in this country, in this Commonwealth, in which all persons are afforded the opportunity to have a quality education. Anything to have a quality education, we want to make sure that we show up at the school board meetings, that we also for our respective state delegates and senators to let them know how we feel in this regard as well. When it comes to our economy, to broadband accessibility is included everywhere. Broadband is included everywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It shouldn't matter what zip code you're from, where you live now. Broadband is something with all of the resources that we've deployed, federal and state, over from the state level, over $700 million investment in broadband alone. So in your communities, make sure that you amplify if your cities, your localities are not having access to broadband the way that they're supposed to, then you should be standing up in the communities where you are. When it comes to broadband, we think that every community should have the information technology band, fully participate in the democracy in everyday life when it comes to healthcare, et cetera. When it comes to health, there have been laws passed to raise the rates for those people providing healthcare services most vulnerable in our community. Those rates have been increased, and we need to make sure that on the private sector, in-home, some people are just as equally as everybody else. When it comes to doulas and giving birth, and for young people in the African American community, we need to make sure that we can have that access as well. So the list goes on and on, brothers, when it comes to education in our schools. This whole notion of CRT or critical race theory is just a slogan in law school that is not actually taught in our K through 12 public schools, but is just a national theme for people to fight against the truth and history being taught. We don't shy away from the fact that history and the truth of the African American community it should be in every classroom across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So don't let anybody tell you this boogeyman theory of this CRT is being taught in our schools and we need to do all we can to fight against it. We need to stand up and make sure the truth and history and accomplishments of our peers across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Brothers, do you have any questions so far? Brother DR.
No
Brother
questions.
Fairchild.
I don't see any questions. Are we able to see the chat group? I don't see that.
Brother Legend has a question.
Yes, this is Brother Legends, Epsilon New Chapter. Thanks for taking my opportunity to take my question. Brother Hayes, my concern is as far as being involved in several community organizations, such as the Richmond Crusade for Voters and other organizations such as that ilk. The problem that we're having is that the voter registration turnout process is not as strong as it could be. What efforts do you see that we need to take as not only Omega Psi Phi, but the rest of the Divine Nine and other civic organizations to actually improve the voter registration?
Brother Hayes, you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard most of it, but it kind of broke up. I think he said
I'm
something
sorry,
about, are you
can you hear
there,
me now?
brothers? Can you hear me?
I'll be more than glad to repeat if need be.
Yeah, Brother Legion,
Brother-
repeat and slow down, please, because we can hear you, but slow down a little bit. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. Sorry about that. My question is, what can we do as civic
brothers,
organizations such as the Divine
Commonwealth.
Line?
So all,
Hey, hold 1 second, Brother Legion. Hey,
Mhm.
Brother Hayes. Brother Hayes,
yes,
Cheryl was trying to get back in.
yes. Yeah, I just let her back in.
Okay. Are you straight?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, Brother Legion.
Yes, once again, thanks for taking my question. My concern is as far as an organization, not only just Omega Psi Phi, but other civic level organizations that are doing community outreach in the form of voter registration. Our voter registration effort seems to be turning out quite low. Do you have any suggestions as to how we can beef that up in order to get more people to register to vote?
Thank you, Brother Legions, and thank you for always being vigilant and here every year for Lobby Day, Brother Legions, and thank you for that question. What we need to make sure that we do is to have these voter registration drives ongoing all the time. We say that because people move in just Georgia. There are efforts to purge people from the rolls. And so you have to maintain your active status until we can take over and become in control again. And one of the things first on the agenda is to make sure that people are no longer purged from the rolls just because they may have not voted in a couple of years. But that's a real thing for people to show up at the polls and to find that they are purged from the rolls. So we need to make sure that we get people registered to vote. And if you move, you need to vote. I mean, register as well. And then, brothers, make sure that we have voter registration drives in our communities wherever we are, and then let as an ongoing effort, just like we have adopted, et cetera, in ministry, and you have those on a regular basis on a Saturday morning. Pick out another Saturday morning of the month and have a registered people establishments. So you can find your local libraries set up right in front of us, encouraging people who come out. We need to make sure that those numbers stay up as strongly as possible. So thank you so much, Brother Legions, for that question.
Brothers, just raise your hand if you have a question for Brother Hayes. The chat group is disabled.
Brother Williams. You can unmute yourself.
Brother Williams, come off of mute.
Unmute yourself, brother. There you go.
I had unmuted. I'm sorry. I apologize. Brother Hayes, you may have answered this, but you were breaking up a little bit when you were answering the previous question. But as an add-on, even though we may increase voter registration, what are your ideas for ensuring that those people that are registered vote? We just have a low turnout sometimes, especially in local and state elections. So any ideas that you can provide would be helpful. Thank you, brother.
Brother Hayes, did you get that?
Mr. Fairclough, this is Cheryl. I'm back on now. I'm sorry, I had technical problems with the internet. I did not hear that question. I might be able to answer if someone could repeat it.
Brother Williams, can you repeat that question?
Yes, I was stating as a follow-on to the response that Brother Hayes gave, is that even though we may increase voter registration, it's voter turnout where it seems that we lack in local and state elections. Any ideas for how we increase voter turnout? Over.
It's an age-old problem, I'll say. It's been an ongoing problem that everybody's been trying to fix, I guess, to make better. And it seems that it really needs to start younger, and the importance of, having parents or, relatives or friends or neighbors taking kids with them to go vote and showing them that that is their right and responsibility to do that. And then just make it part of life. Another part is we had a great turnout this past election. In our area, they had people who were going door to door to remind people, to encourage them to answer their questions, and just making that personal connection, not just sending a letter, not just making an announcement from a podium, but personally going out and asking individuals, have you voted? Do you need a ride? Do you need me to help you get an absentee ballot? I think that there needs to be more of that personal one-on-one to encourage people and to follow up with them to make certain that they do actually vote. Because a lot of people say they vote. I hear it all the time with Delegate Hayes. They say, oh, I always vote for Delegate Hayes. And, we have access to the voting list. So we see when people have voted in elections and have not. And oftentimes people who say they've been voting for Delegate Hayes for years, they're registered, but they've never voted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would like to add, for some reason on the news, CNN, ABC, NBC, and Fox are stating that the Democrats are not going to go out and vote during the midterm election, not go out and vote. The turnout will be low. We got to make sure that we encourage all Democrats in this nation, in the state of Virginia, to go out and vote during the midterm elections. We cannot stay at home and sit back and say, oh, we're going to lose anyway. We can't do that. We got to get everybody out to vote. So call your mama, call your sister, call your brother, call your aunt, your uncle, and cousin, and tell them to get out and vote. It is important. People have died for the right to vote. Martin Luther King died for the right to vote. So thank you very much. I'm gonna just leave it right there. But for every morning I wake up, that's what I hear. The Democrats are not gonna go out during the midterm and vote. So please don't do that. Thank you very much. Bob?
Okay, are there any other questions? Brother Hayes, are you still on?
My hand is raised. I didn't, in the chat room, I didn't know if.
I see him.
Whose hand was that?
His hand is blended into his color in the background, but go ahead, Ted Braggs.
I wanted to ask a question in a slightly different vein. Last year, or the last time we got together, you were talking to Delegate Hayes. He seemed to be really excited about the prospect of redistricting in Virginia. And I don't know how well that went or how successful it was, but can you give us your reflections on how it went and what happened to not, I don't think we got the results that we deserved, but just give us your reflections on that entire process.
Is that for me?
Yes.
I was for Delegate Hayes, but yeah, whoever can
I'll
answer
take
it.
it.
Let me just addendum to that. Why are the Democrats so passive in going out and trying to attempt these things? I mean, it seems like new Governor Youngkin's coming in fired up already and just not taking any, just gonna take names. So what's up with that?
Well, I think, gosh, that's a big question. Democrats are now, I believe, are very much activist driven. So you see a lot of activism, a lot of vocal, people speaking out, and that's all wonderful, but it's not translating over, I don't think, to, or it can't really translate over into government as much, because in government, you have to work together to get things done. You can't be one-sided. You have to have everybody involved. And so I think that it's not the activism isn't translating, this is my personal opinion, it's not translating into changes in government. If that, I don't know how to, and it did when the Democrats were in control the last 2 years. There were lots of changes with justice reform, voting, all of those things. But all the people who were out there, speaking out and being active in the community, they didn't turn out to vote in the same numbers that they go out to be vocal. And it needs to be not just activism, it also needs to be voting and being active in the government process, not just in the community speaking process. And I think that's where there's kind of a disconnect, where it's just not translating over into working with government to get things done. And again, you have to work with the House has to work with the Senate, the House and Senate have to work with the governor, even if they're the different party, you still have to, for government to work, there comes a time when you have to come to compromises and to get things done. And that will segue right into redistricting. So what happened with redistricting is a constitutional amendment passed to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission. And so that commission was structured by the General Assembly to where there was equal representation by Democrats and Republicans on the commission who were not active in politics. They were non-political. They weren't associated with, they were chosen by the parties at equal numbers. So the Democrats chose their people, Republicans chose their people, but the people they chose couldn't be active participants in Democratic or Republican politics. So, so that left out all legislators, all chiefs of staff, anybody like that that has that inner knowledge. So the commission met and they could not come to an agreement as to how the district should be drawn. The Republicans presented something, or Democrats presented something, maps, rather, they each presented their own maps that they wanted. And ideally, they would have come to some sort of a compromise, but that didn't happen because the numbers were equal. So Republicans didn't win, Democrats didn't win. What happens if they couldn't come to, or what happened since they couldn't come to an agreement, it got sent to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court hired map makers that are map drawers, map masters, they call them, to draw the districts. And so what happens it happens every 10 years after the census, the General Assembly has to redistrict. And the reason for that is that, say in 2010, delegates represented 80,000 constituents apiece. There are 100 delegates. Each one of them represents 80,000 constituents, or give or take a few, 80,000 constituents. And so what happens is they take all of the residents of the Commonwealth of Virginia and from the census numbers, and then they divvy them up by 100, and that equaled the 80-some thousand. And if you think about it like a puzzle, each piece is like a puzzle that connects together. That's each district. So the 100 districts, they have to redistrict because after the next census, the population increased throughout the Commonwealth, but in some of those districts, the population decreased. And in some districts, it increased. And so what happens is that they have to redistribute all those people, and now we're at 86,000 per district. So if we didn't redistrict every 10 years, you could have a district, one of the 100 districts, you could have a legislator representing 50,000 constituents and another legislator representing 100,000 constituents. So that's why we redistrict, is to make sure that each delegate represents the same number of constituents. And so what's happening now is that there's a challenge before the Supreme Court saying that because the delegates ran in the old districts under the 2010 redistricting, that they are not, that one man, one vote is not being represented. Because again, some delegates right now are representing a lot more constituents and some are representing a lot less. And so when they redistrict, they have to, and so that could cause the delegates to have to run again next year rather than the 2-year cycle. We're still waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on whether or not they're going to have to run again in the new districts prior to the next election. I know that's really complicated, but what was I going to say about the, hold on one second. Let me get my thoughts together.
Hey, sure. While you're holding that thought, Delegate Bagby is on, so
Oh, good.
we don't want to get behind on our schedule.
Great.
So if we could hold that thought and let him speak, because we don't like.
Absolutely. No, please don't let him wait.
You want to introduce him?
Hi, Delegate Bagby.
Hello,
Well,
everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Delegate Bagby. I represent the 74th House District, also chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. Happy that the members, including my good friends, Cliff Hayes and Luke Torian, decided to vote me in for another term this past month. And so excited to serve. As you all know and probably heard, and we'll hear from other members, we have our hands full, to say the least, this session. There has already been a number of pieces of legislation that we have our eyes on, and it's really focused on turning back the hands of time, focus on reversing legislation that we put in the last few years to address housing, address voting rights, address healthcare, and the one that seems to be their most, the one they seem most passionate about is education. And they are giving us fool's gold, and they're putting chocolate on it and telling us it's Raisinets. But we understand what they're doing. And so we're going to be fighting very hard to protect the war that they've declared on Black history. You all have seen it, tons of commercials and tons of media coverage related to CRT. I think this last cycle, election cycle, many on our side had a hard time explaining what CRT is and the importance of telling the true and full history. But Youngkin has played a great game of saying that he wants to tell, even in his speech from the podium on Saturday as he was inaugurated, he said that he wanted to tell the full history, the good and the bad. But then he goes back into the Capitol and signs an executive order that just says exact opposite. And so we're going to be laser focused on making sure that we call them out, and not only call them out, but block the legislation that they intend to push, including education that they intend to push related to the charter schools. And I wish very much that I could trust them to do charter schools in a responsible fashion. But the same individuals that are pushing the charter schools, like Glenn Davis, has a piece of legislation in which he doesn't want us to even consider race or ethnicity when it comes to admitting individuals to the governor's schools. We know we've had far too long, we've had an issue with admitting students to governor's schools. You may, really quickly, you may realize that we focus on a number of issues, and you can go to the VLBC.com to see the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus agenda, the VBLC.com, and you will see what our agenda is. At the top of the list, some of the priorities you will see will be education, as I just spoke of. And the Republicans have been, like I said, declared war on Black history. They took me off the education committee, and that was alarming. But then we talk about voting rights, which is you hear on the national stage. But I'm very proud of, over the last couple of years, led by Delegate Marcia Price and Senator Jennifer McClellan, we've been able to pass the Virginia Voting Rights Bill of Rights. And so there are a number of things that you all have seen related to voting early, the boxes and all sorts of things that we did to make voting easy. Never in the Commonwealth has voting been this easy. And that was a large part due to the leadership of Jennifer McClellan and Marcia Price. Well, they took Marcia Price off of privileges and elections. And then we have also spent a great deal of time focused on justice reform. And I don't always call it criminal justice reform because not all the individuals are criminals that are going through the justice system. So we were focused on justice reform. And I got to give my friend Don Scott a great deal of credit for leading the way on that. And you guessed it, they took Don Scott off of the Crim Sub Courts Committee. And so it is not something that they just woke up and thought they were going to do. This is well planned out, and we are ready for the fight.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Delegate Bagby?
I do have a question. Delegate Bagby, this is Cheryl in Delegate Hayes's office. And I was speaking about redistricting, and I was just getting ready to get into the majority, majority districts, and how they changed, the numbers changed with the redistricting that just went through. If you could talk a little bit about that, because I know you'll know more about the numbers than I do.
Well, the numbers are a bit shady. I mean, at the end of the day, they didn't take into consideration the way that I wish race. And it feels like on every level and every turn and every particular issue, they're trying to erase race from the discussion. But that leads us to a challenge that you all in the Hampton Roads area may see if you live in the Hampton Roads area, where two giants, in my opinion, Louise Lucas and what's the other gentleman's name? No, I'm just joking. Louise Lucas is put in the same district as Lionel Spruill. And so that is alarming. Then across the state, you have delegates placed in the districts with other delegates, particularly in districts that have overwhelmingly number of Blacks in it, and they still have us packed in. It's no secret because you can look at the election results and you can look at VPAP. But I'll use myself as an example. I have a district that is overwhelmingly majority, particularly Black, and I wanted to spread that out a little bit, just as Bobby Scott did for Donald McEachin to allow for us to have a second congressional district. And I think many of us wanted to do that. Cliff Hayes actually did that to help out Clinton Jenkins a couple years ago. But we need to make sure that we're not having these compact districts that oversaturate Blacks in respective districts. We want to have a voice throughout the Commonwealth. And so it's very important that in the future, we have districts that don't put all of us in one in respective districts, and we're able to have a greater voice. The numbers are decreasing for particularly Black districts. They're increasing somewhat for minority, but the Black districts are decreasing. And so that's alarming for all of us. But not much we can do about that because the legislation and the amendment has already passed.
Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Bagby. Stefan's phone, who is Stefan?
I muted him already, Bob. See, Jerome Legion has his hand up.
Okay, I want to make sure he's not a delegate. Okay, Brother Legion.
Yes, thanks for taking my call my question once again. Delegate Bagby, on your website, the vblc.com website, are there House bills that's listed, or House and Senate bills that are listed there? And are there any that you think that organizations should rally around? Because it seems like when folks go down and lobby with a House bill or Senate bill in hand, they get an opportunity to speak. And it seems like that grassroots person that's having that opportunity to speak will receive some attention, and it will actually sort of drive more, I guess, conversation or support for that particular bill.
Yeah, and what you, thank you. Because that sets me up for two responses to your one question. One is the system is moving slow because we had a hacker jump into the system just before session. And so the bills are coming out pretty slow. But as the bills come out and we have the bills in order, we had a call last night as a House caucus. As the bills come out and we are able to compile those lists after the bills come out, we will have those bills online so that you can see what we are opposed to and what we are in support of. Primarily what you will see on the VLBC website right now would be the agenda item and the issue. And along with that, you may see for some of them who is the patron of the bill. But the bill numbers aren't there because a lot of the bill numbers we don't have just yet. But we will have them available very soon. So if you would check back at the VLBC site, and we will make sure that we update it once we get all that information.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Delegate Bagby, there was a question asked about how we can push people to vote in the state of Virginia. Can you elaborate on that, what your thoughts are, and how we can motivate folks to get to the polls?
Well, I think, I know what I plan to do, and that is the plan to get the message out earlier. And not just the message out earlier to go vote, but I want individuals to know what exactly is going on. And for example, when it comes to public education, if you just read the newspaper, it's so surface level that you don't really understand what they're trying to do. When it comes to voting rights, even this year, the Republicans probably won't have their way with voting rights because we will block it in the Senate. But just as I told someone yesterday, a reporter yesterday, you should look at what we propose in the 19 legislature to see what we were going to do when we got the majority in 2020 and 21. This year is their 19, if it makes any sense. This is the year that they're going to propose legislation, but it may not be successful. But if they get the majority in the House, the Senate, and they already have the keys to the mansion, but if they get the House and the Senate, then it will show you what they will do if they get the majority. And I'll tell you, if folks were able to actually see the legislation that is before us, they will be at the polling place waiting in line right now till November. It's just that disturbing. The way that they have tried to erase Black history just illustrates how they feel about everything else, how they feel about housing, and giving individuals a hand up, how they feel about healthcare, and how they want to combat our efforts there. Even when you talk about the mask, it's just a game that they're playing. And most of it is they know it's wrong, but it's raw meat to their electorate. And so we need to make sure that our electorate understands what's going on and what's at stake in the next couple of years. It probably won't happen this year. It'll be a lot of posturing, I think, this year. But next year, if they're able to get the House and the Senate, we are in a world of trouble. So I think getting the message out and whatever means of communication that we use, usually the 60 days before the election, we need to do that 6 months before the election so individuals will actually be in the know.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. And today we have another delegate on. Jeff Bourne is on now. And again, in the interest of keeping our time moving forward, if you want to hang on, I see you, evidently Brother Dillard had a question for you, but I would like to go to Bourne first, and then if we have the opportunity to come back and pick you up. Okay.
I got to jump off. I'll try to jump back on.
Okay, appreciate you. Thank you much.
Okay.
Hey, Lamont, I'll answer
Yes,
I'll answer your question for you.
I appreciate you, Doc.
You got to take all full responsibility for whatever I say too.
Hey, I'll roll with it. Y'all be blessed.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fairchild. I appreciate the opportunity, and I don't see him on my screen, but thanks to Cliff for inviting me here to speak to the men of Omega Psi Phi. I caught a little bit of what Chairman Bagley was talking about, and I don't think I can state it any better about what's at stake here and sort of what we've seen in the first few days of this session over the weekend through the inauguration. Has been nothing short of an attack on all the progress that we've been able to make, but more importantly, the Black history, that is Virginia history, that is US history, that is world history. I was a little bit late hopping on because I'm just coming from the Education Committee, and one of the things that we did was hear from the designated Secretary of Education, and I will tell you that their philosophy on education, their inspiration, if you will, on education is nothing short of alarming. I believe they are going to do much harm to the students across Virginia that look like us. And they don't have a real understanding or an appreciation for the differences and the cultural competencies and background with which our children come to school with, and many of the challenges that they do. And so I look forward to fighting them each and every step of the way, and also advocating for those improvements that I think we all would agree are much needed, not the least of which is fully funding our schools and taking our responsibilities seriously. We've underfunded public education for far too long. We still have healthcare disparities, as have been highlighted, exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. We still have lots of work to do on criminal justice reform, making sure that we have enough affordable housing for everyone who wants it, and the host of other issues that are of utmost importance. And I fear we're going to roll back and look backwards rather than look forward. This may be a little flip, but Over the weekend, as I listened to some of the speeches, saw some of the commentary, I wondered whether or not the words that were coming out of the leadership legislatively in the House and from our statewide folks are just lyrics to a new version of Carry Me Back to Old Virginia. And so I'm just proud to stand with my brothers and sisters in the Black Caucus to continue to fight the good fight. We've been here before, and we'll be back on top again soon enough. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Brotherhood might have.
Okay, Brother Dillard, your question?
Yes, sir. And that's a good segue into my question. It seems like the critical race theory is being misused to scare people. And I really think we've gotten into the scare tactic. My question is, what can we do to properly explain what the goal of critical race theory or any proper teaching of history is? And can we, as African Americans, as educators, as representatives of the government, stand forward and speak that we are in favor of these things? I think oftentimes the other side will speak against it, and that automatically gains them votes. And then they make it sound like that critical race theory is just about bashing white folk and their past. Of course, that gains more momentum. So how can we attack that without using their tactics?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is to continue to remind them that despite their yelling from deep within their lungs, that critical race theory is not taught in Virginia right now, and I don't think it ever has. One, two, I think that continuing to hammer them on the sort of things that aren't able to be reconciled with them saying we want to teach the history, the good, the bad, the ugly, but also dismissing what they are describing as political and divisive ideals and parts of that history has to be challenged head on. And I think after conversations, Lamont and I talk pretty regularly, and if we're gonna really step into this this space and really argue about and advocate for equality and equity in our education system, we've got to lean into this issue. We can't run from it because we'll lose every time. The fact that our schools all across Virginia are now majority minority or non-white has to compel us to teach all of the history, whether you're talking about the actual history of what actually happened when America was founded and taking the land away from our Native Americans, or the fact that this country was built on the backs of Black people. That has to be taught. And the idea that something wrong with teaching our children that historically Black people have been looked at as, I guess, as 3/5 of a person at some point, but throughout our history, sometimes it's been less than 3/5, right? And we've not always enjoyed all of the ideals and freedoms and opportunities that other folks have had. And I have to credit my senator, Senator McClellan, who's on, with reminding us a few days ago that really this democracy is not 400 years old. It's far short, it's far younger than that. I mean, democracy, the full democracy didn't really start until the Civil Rights Act in 1965. So those are the types of points, those are the types of things that we have to continue to hammer home. And at the end of the day, we have to make our voices known and heard, as Chairman Bagley said, at the ballot box. And we've got to get more of our folks out, more of the people that enjoy the progress and who have benefited from the progress that we've been able to make over the last couple of years, engaged in a higher and more substantive way.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Bourne, for your comments. I'd like to now, if we can, shift to
Brother Fairchild, there is another question in the chat.
Okay,
On the
okay,
line.
Brother Dave, Brother Braggs.
Dillard is on. Derek
Dylan,
Dillard.
we just did his question.
Okay, he didn't lower his hand.
And Bragg, I'll come back to you if you don't mind.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. My question just got answered, so I just didn't raise I lower my hand. Thank you.
Mr. Fairchild,
Yes.
I do need to run. It sounds like you're in transition to someone much smarter than I am, Senator McClellan. But I would be remiss if I didn't recognize and say hello to my good friend, Jerome Liggins, who's always one to keep me and hold me accountable and does an awesome job building Carver into what it can be and what it should be. So just want to say good morning to him and thanks for all the hard work that he's doing.
Hey, thank you very much for coming out and sharing the information with us. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. I'll say, okay, Senator McClellan, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you all for having me this morning. And I am sorry we cannot be together in person. But honestly, it's a little bit easier on a busy day like today to jump around and see more people virtually than in person. So, I'll choose to see this as glass half full rather than glass half empty. It is always a pleasure to be with the Qs. As many of you may recall, my grandfather was a Q and one of the professors who helped found the chapter at Fisk University. And his legacy lives on through me. I've got so much I want to say today, but I want to jump to your questions. And so let me try to be brief and piggyback a little bit off of what Delegate Bourne said. We have heard over the past year so many people quote one sentence of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, including our new governor. And yet it has become clear to me based on their actions and some of their words that they haven't read the whole speech, nor have they read the entire body of work of Dr. King. And they certainly have not taken to heart his true mission, which was to build the beloved community. It has been my profound honor to chair the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission here in Virginia, which celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. And we have been focused on keeping Dr. King's life and legacy alive through public policy, through public history, through public discourse and community conversations. And that work is critically important now more than ever. But I want to challenge you to do a couple of things. One, it is up to us to make sure that on Dr. King's holiday and every day, that we remind people of all of his work and all of his words, which were focused on making the reality of our country true for everyone. The reality match the ideals upon which our country was founded of life, liberty, and justice for all. And that the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, the effects of it did not go away with the wave of a magic wand when legal segregation ended. What Dr. King's work was about was taking action to redress those wrongs, that it was up to all of us to do that. I challenge you now. It is up to us to tell that history. Yes, we are fighting over whether it will be taught in schools, but there are a lot of adults who don't fully know that history. And we are losing daily more and more people who lived through the reality of Jim Crow and saw its effects in our communities. It is up to us to tell those stories. It is up to us to share our perspectives, because if there's one thing I have learned since being in the General Assembly, this is my 16th year, it is that everybody's personal political views, their policy views, how they look at bills is shaped by their life experiences and what they know. They don't know our life experiences. They don't know our perspective. It is up to us to tell it. It's because of our perspectives that finally we were able to make generational change in Virginia to begin to address inequity. That's all under attack. You name the issue, we made progress. You name the issue, it is under attack. And so I call on you not to sit silently and not to assume that people will understand the history. Someone already asked a question about critical race theory and how can we get people to understand what it really means? They don't care. They don't care what it really means. Rather than framing the discussion or having the discussion the way they frame it, pivot and have the discussion on what's important. What's important is that we teach our history, all of it, but not just the dates, how that history impacts us today, and that each of us remind people that that is how public policy was shaped and continues to impact our communities. So with that, I've probably spoken longer than I was supposed to, and I do want to answer any questions that you all have. But let me just finally say, we need you all more than ever. We are in for the fight of our lives to make sure we do not roll progress in this latest backlash against progress, social, economic, and political progress that Black and Brown Americans and Virginians have made. We cannot do this work alone. We need your help. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Brother Legend?
Yes, thanks, Senator McClellan, for taking my question. The new Lieutenant Governor has spoke highly throughout her campaign about funding HBCUs. Are there any efforts from the General Assembly, from the Democratic side, as well as those of us who have attended HBCUs? What efforts do you think are in place, and what efforts do we need to put in place to see some sort of movement in funding HBCUs?
So thank you, Jerome, for that question, and good to see you. I think this is the last election was a really good example of how Democrats are terrible about bragging on our work. We actually Democrats invested more in Virginia's HBCUs, public and private, over the past 2 years than ever before. And Governor Northam's outgoing budget includes additional funding. And I can get to you all a summary of what is in that budget. The problem is we're terrible about bragging on ourselves. So I will get you more details on what that funding entails. But it is more, the outgoing budget that Northam introduced has more funding for HBCUs than ever. And I want to remind you one thing. I was at the education summit that the House and Senate Education Committees held. And we were talking about some of the challenges that our HBCUs face. A Republican delegate asked, well, why don't HBCUs just use more of their endowment to help pay for financial aid for students? She didn't understand that HBCUs don't have the kind of endowments that their white counterparts have, and that they were historically underfunded for decades. And so pay attention to their actions and not just their words, and we will do a better job of explaining and touting and celebrating the actions that we have done that have actually helped HBCUs more than ever before.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Brother Fletcher, I have a question.
Yes.
So, Senator, there was a lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken, about 10 years ago for HBCUs. Do we need to do that again in order to get more buildings and more funding? Like, as some of the HBCUs, parking is like for homecoming and different events, it's very terrible. It's just bad. And so we need more buildings and we need more parking at these HBCUs. Can you address that? What do you think we need to do? Do we need to do a lawsuit or not?
I'm not sure yet. Let's see what happens with this introduced budget. And again, before I jump off, I will put in the chat a link to and a summary to what's in the budget, but that was the introduced budget. And it has to go through both the House and the Senate Finance Committees, Appropriation Committee, and the governor's desk. So I would wait and see what happens with this budget at the end of this session. But if we don't see more progress, then I think we should consider legal action.
Okay, thank you very much for Senator McClellan for coming on. We appreciate your comments and thank you for answering the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Price.
Isn't the chat turned off? Is there someone she can send that link to directly?
Yeah, I'll give it to Cliff, and Cliff can get it to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. You all have a great day.
Okay, take care. Okay, Delegate Price, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Yes, thank you and good morning. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and so it is so good to be with members of the Divine Nine. I just wanted to share some thoughts with you on the importance of this session, and I apologize if anything is redundant, but sometimes redundancy is good to really drill in what we are facing now. But I think, you know, we are definitely at a crossroads, and I brought greetings to you all before Cliff has set this up and before we had hope in the progress that we could make. And we did it. With your help and advocacy, we got voting rights protected, access to healthcare. Like we were just talking about the HBCUs, I'm attending my 3rd HBCU. So please understand that the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus has been working to protect HBCUs for far beyond this new incoming administration. We've been working on tenants' rights, gun violence prevention, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, economic justice, and more. And we navigated through the beginning of this pandemic, offering where people needed help, including more than $1 billion in rent, mortgage, and utility relief, and a coordinated effort on vaccinations. We showed that we can govern by centering the voices of those that needed it most. Now, unfortunately, that did not translate to victory in the political sphere. And I know you are a nonprofit, but just it shows that we are facing a shift in power dynamics and changes that threaten the progress that we have made. But there are 3 things that have not changed. Our communities across the Commonwealth still need us to show up for them. And 2, we are not powerless. We never have been, we never will be, but we are up against a threat on how do we navigate the world within our power, because we cannot afford to operate under assumptions and just sit back and assume things are going to go our way or not go our way. And we dang sure cannot be silent in the face of what might be happening, good, bad, or indifferent. And that is why I take comfort that members of the Divine Nine are here, even if virtually. It shows that you continue to stand at the forefront of advocacy efforts. And the 3rd thing that I know that is completely unchanged is that the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus will continue to fight. So to share very briefly my legislative priorities, Senator McClellan and I got the Voting Rights Act of Virginia passed along with a huge package of bills. If you found that it was easy to vote last time, all of those protections and ease of access, that is at stake. They've already put bills in order to roll back that access, but we have to hold the line. We also need to pass the Restoration of Rights constitutional amendment again, where it had an affirmative that the right to vote is an actual right and would be protected in our Constitution, and there would be an automatic restoration of rights process that has to pass again and then get to the voters in November. So sometimes it's hard to be as honest because you don't want to pull the curtain back completely. But it is not hyperbole to say that the sky is falling on our democracy. And I just want to be very clear, because I know all of the Divine Nine organizations hold voting to be very dear. Our advocacy within the democracy space needs to ramp up significantly, because literally the sky is falling and the writing is on the wall. You can see it in the bills that they're passing and in the national strategy that they have in order to potentially play some games with the next elections. I'm also continuing to work to make housing more affordable and accessible. And then I'm also responding to the needs of 95th District constituents and so many others around the Commonwealth that are currently incarcerated, and making that re-entry process smoother, especially around fees and fines, and seeing what economic justice can look like in that space with criminal justice reform. Continuing to work in law enforcement accountability, and then of course addressing that gun violence is 100% preventable, but it takes strategies, especially within urban everyday gun violence, that recognize the health and economic root causes and impacts of said gun violence. So again, I like to keep it cute, but I want to be very clear that we are at war, and no handshakes, sweater vests, smooth talking, none of that changes the fact that the legislation that has been proposed will keep us locked up for longer, will keep us in the current economic crisis that we're in, and extend the life of a pandemic. We are at war. And so I look forward to seeing you in committee meetings, in our email boxes, and doing the advocacy, the type of advocacy that I know that the men of Omega Psi Phi fraternity can do. And with that, I thank you, and I will take any questions.
Any questions, brothers?
Brother Fairchild, I have one.
Yes, Brother Morgan.
Yes, Delegate Price, what do you think about this mask removal in classrooms and putting our kids at risk with the virus, Omicron virus, at about 800,000 persons a day getting sick, and the mask removal in the classroom? It just doesn't add up, and it doesn't make any sense. Can you address that, please?
Yes. And I will say, Mr. Morgan, it does add up if you understand the math that they are doing. It is raw meat for their base, with disregard for public school kids. That's what the math is. And that math adds up perfectly. And it is unconscionable to think, for those of us that are in Hampton Roads, I represent parts of Newport News and a small part of Hampton. But for those of us that represent Hampton Roads, CHKD just came out right at the beginning of the year that they were full. They were full. So what we're doing is we are going to overburden our hospital systems that take care of our babies. And so the lives that are at risk are the ones that needed more protecting, not less. And one of the things that I think that we learned at the beginning of the pandemic that people seem to forget, my mask protects you and your mask protects me. So you running around without anything on your face is putting teachers, staff, students at risk. It is unconscionable. And then you just think about the radiating effects, right? My nephew in New York, unfortunately, got COVID, completely asymptomatic. He playing with Legos and everything while he has basically a free day at home. But my sister caught it from him, and she's still in the bed 2 weeks later. Right. And so it's this radiating effect because people have high risk family members that are continuing to be at risk. We have to worry about the children. We have to worry about their families. We have to worry about our communities. And I think there are going to be some legal challenges as to whether or not he has the authority to do such. So yes, I'm glad that you all recognize it for what it is.
And to that, Brother Fairchild,
yes,
I just thank Delegate Price for coming on with us. And, brothers, just know that the members of the Black Caucus that we have, and certainly Delegate Price included in this comment, are members of our community who fight vehemently against anything that's going to be detrimental to us. And Delegate Price has always been known for someone who's going to be an enemy of mendacity and speak the truth without any ketchup and relish on it and making it pretty. She's gonna speak the plain truth. And what she just said there about, and this whole message hasn't changed since we've heard about the virus coming out, that just decent courtesy You putting a mask on is protecting other people around you. And just that whole thought of folks just ignoring that fact, not caring about the decency of other people is at its disrespect at its highest. Brothers, I just buried my aunt just past Saturday who contracted COVID because some folks came around during a time of, I think that was late March, April of 2020. She contracted COVID back then, was put on a ventilator in ICU, eventually taken off the ventilator, but never regained consciousness. And ever since August of 2020, she was in a nursing home, unconscious, and ultimately perished last week. So you can't convince me it doesn't matter whether or not you wear a mask or not, and that we just need to be decent human beings. And in fact, much of what you heard Delegate Price mention, what you've heard Delegate Bourne mention, what you've heard Senator McClellan mention, what you've heard Delegate Bagby mention, and so forth and so on, all of these issues are policy matters, laws that the Black Caucus and our people have been fighting as long as we can remember. And so to have the successes that we've had in these last 2 years, it makes no sense for us to just stand there and watch them roll back the changes that have been made. I'll just stop there, and I apologize, Sia, for cutting across, but you just hit a nerve.
No, you are welcome to it.
These people, they done lost their minds.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. Brother Legion, can we hold your question? Because we need to make a shift here so we don't get behind. Delegate Graves is present. I'd like to go and get her comments. Thank you, Delegate Price, for your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Delegate Graves? You're muted.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I am on my way to Richmond driving, and I pulled over to be able to join the Men of Omega Psi Phi. I just want to say thank you all for all that you all are doing and everything that you do in the spirit of community service and service to others, the examples that you set for our young men in our communities who desperately need good role models and positive examples of what real Black men look like and what that means for our community. So thank you so much for that. And I'm willing to take any questions. I jumped in a COVID mask conversation, and I just echo all of the sentiments that were made by Delegate Price, as well as by Delegate Hayes, because wearing a mask is a simple thing that we can do to protect everybody involved. And I kind of use the example, if you want to get knocked down, drag out drunk, and get in your car and wrap yourself around a telephone pole, feel free to do that. But usually what happens is people get knocked down, drag out drunk, they get in their car and they kill someone else. And so to me, wearing a mask is the same thing. If you want your privilege of being sick, have at it. But your privilege of being sick does not mean that you get the right to infect me or other people around you. So I definitely echo those sentiments. And again, thank you all for having me. And I'm willing to take any questions if there are any for me specifically.
Okay, Brother Legions, did you have a question that she can answer for you? I know I don't want to.
She can answer it, or Delegate Hayes can answer it. My concern and my question is that in the city of Richmond, folks are about to be put out of public housing. The eviction notice, the eviction moratorium, it seems like it's being lifted. And so if these folks are put out of their homes, then, and especially with the Omicron virus going on, my question is there a possibility, or is there a legislature that actually will, for lack of a better term, kick the can down the road to prevent that moratorium from happening with inside of this new variant of COVID?
I don't know the answer to that question, to be perfectly honest with you. I know in Norfolk, our redevelopment and housing authority worked very hard, and they were very diligent in working with residents who got behind because of whatever reason, if they couldn't work, if they were terminated, if their jobs where they worked were shut down, to document and make sure that all of the necessary paperwork was filled out that was required, and those who lost their jobs and had no income, obviously their rents were reset according to their income. But I don't know the answer to the question with regard to the overall moratorium. Perhaps either Delegate Price or Delegate Hayes could jump in on that.
Yeah, I'll just speak to it briefly from the respect of appropriations. We know that many resources were provided through the budget last cycle to make sure that we were able to stave off those evictions for a long, very long time. It is the intent of some legislators that have recently come, as well as the administration, to end that moratorium and to no longer have those resources available. So we just got to continue to be vigilant and understand much of what we see, what we feel that is uncomfortable and distasteful to us as a people, that there are consequences to elections. And so who, where really matters. Who's elected and who's in what role really matters. And to the point of Brother Legion's question, when we had Governor Northam in place while we in the House were in control and working in concert along with an Attorney General whose interpretation was the same philosophy as ours, and a Lieutenant Governor who felt the same way, and a Senate who felt the same way, you noticed the results that you got. That has changed as of November. We got to be more vigilant, more wise than to fall for the okey doke. We as a people, we as a fraternity have never on our principles believed in just showcasing one or two individuals and letting them, put them on a pedestal and being a trophy for what should be something for the masses of the people. That's never something that we've bought into. And so we shouldn't start now. So just to see a situation where you have a trophy here or there, sitting in an elected position, pretending as though they're representing the issues that we love and that are near and dear to us. You ought to just be around when Delegate Graves, Delegate Senator McClellan, Senator Lucas, Delegate Bagby, all of us in the Black Caucus sit and watch Black folk, elected Black officials, stand and get over slavery. You need to get over it. Yeah. We just believe that if you forget history, slowly you will see history roll back, and you'll be living in the times in which we read about in books, and many of us who lived during the 50s and 60s, that we don't ever want to see those days again. But if we don't participate in this democracy and fight vigorously, you're going to see us back to some stuff that just isn't pleasant. Just know it's not an easy fight where we are in this General Assembly fighting. Even now, today, as we are virtual, there are many folks who are here in person blanketing the Capitol grounds, trying to get as many guns back on the street as they can, trying to get a bunch of foolishness in our laws here in the Commonwealth. So I can't wait to return back to next year when we can have a legislative lobby day in person, so that not only these people in orange marching around, we'll have the men of purple and gold standing strong as well, because it makes a difference. These people ask the question, who are those men in them dark suits with the purple and gold ties on? And we just respond to them. When you return home, they're gonna be waiting at your legislative offices, waiting to have a talk with you.
Absolutely. Delegate Hayes, let me jump in. I just want to offer to the brother who asked the question with regard to evictions. I will tell you that one of the difficult things that coming from the local level into the state, one of the difficult things that I saw when I was on council and all these moratoriums started to go into place was the lack of communication and response from residents. And so residents kind of thought they didn't have to do anything. And so because they felt like they didn't have to do anything, they weren't responding to the staff from in Norfolk, our NRHA, and you all have a redevelopment and housing authority in Richmond. And so what I would encourage you all to do as community activists and as public servants as well, is to anyone who calls you or contacts you, make sure that they get in contact with their housing authority, their landlord, because these moratorium requirements are twofold. It's not just that the landlord can get the money and for the mortgage or get their rent and pay their mortgage, but the tenant also has a responsibility as well. And so they cannot just put their head in the sand and say, oh, well, they got this money, which a lot of people really do. Oh, well, they got this money and they're going to be okay. And so I don't have to do anything. And then they look up and now the landlord has the right to evict them. And so just encourage folks to reach out to their housing authority representative, their caseworker, encourage them to reach out to their landlord if they have vouchers that they are, that they're utilizing and they're facing eviction, because it is a two-way street and landlords and tenants have to be on the same page. And the other problem I will tell you too is the lack of ability for folks to have good technology. So a lot of times there may be documents that tenants have to provide copies of, and the lack of technology to be able to scan something or email something, it seems very second nature to most of us. But to folks who don't work in an industry where email and internet and all of that is prevalent, and they don't have that skill set, it is very difficult, and it often is a barrier for them to be able to get the help that they need. So they have the documentation they need, but they don't know how to get it to the people that need it. And they don't really often understand how to ask for help, or they're embarrassed to ask for help. So I would just recommend that, the people that you're being made aware of, that they reach out to their housing authority and their landlord so that they can get the help that they need, because it is available, but the tenants have to do their part as well.
Okay, Delegate Graves, thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate you. We thank you, and while you're out there on the road, you be very, very careful.
Thank you for having me. I'm gonna log off so I can get back on the road. Y'all have a great day. Be blessed and stay safe.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate King, you are here and we thank you for waiting. We like to hear what you got to say. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Brother Hayes for pulling us all together. I have to say a special good morning to my home chapter serving my community is Pi Lambda Lambda. The Pi Lambda Lambda brothers just show up in so many ways. So when Brother Hayes talked about those dark suits, let me just tell you, as women serving in this time, as Black women serving in this time, when I go to school board meetings, when I go to community meetings, it is a very different tone and tenor when my brothers show up in those Black suits. When folks who think that they can come into a space and act any old type of way, they act very, very different towards Black women when they see the brothers in the Black suits. So thank you all so much for showing up for the community, but also for those of us who have stepped into this public life. It really means a lot. So I know a lot of talk has been shared about the governor and all of those things that he has going on, but I want to share about some of my legislative agenda this year, starting with Mia's Law. Many have heard the tragic story of a young woman in Florida who was murdered by a gentleman who used to work for her apartment complex and still had access to the master key. So I have worked with her family and they have created a foundation and we're working towards Mia's Law, which would require landlords to create policies to prevent those who no longer work for an apartment complex. It would prevent them from having access to those master keys. As we see more apartment buildings being built, we see key fobs with keyless entry, and we see all of these technologies. Well, landlords need to be responsible with how they switch out those things. So this one I'm very proud of, because oftentimes when young Black and brown women are victims of crime, when they lose their lives, they're not treated like their white counterparts. And her family has taken their grief and they've turned it into action. And so I'm proud to partner with them on that. So one thing that Brother Hayes and I share is our passion for the sickle cell anemia community. I am the proud mother of an 11-year-old sickle cell warrior. I've been very involved in sickle cell advocacy. And this year, we're taking it up a notch by introducing 2 pieces of legislation aimed at supporting the sickle cell community. When I was growing up, and when many of you were probably growing up, sickle cell was seen as a childhood disease. People with sickle cell rarely made it to 18 years old. And so a lot of the treatment was focused on pediatrics. What we find now is that young adults, particularly in the Hampton Roads area, are facing higher numbers of crisis and death. Hampton Roads has the largest number of deaths from sickle cell than anywhere else in Virginia. And it is largely because people don't have access to adult treatment. They don't have access to resources. Living in Northern Virginia, you know, my daughter is receiving some of the best care in the country. And I believe that every Virginian should have the same access. But often when you're looking at Black and brown communities, which sickle cell is centered in, it's ignored. So we've created legislation to create a sickle cell advisory board, which would help us have the data and proof to show where we should be investing. We also want to increase access to treatment. Many people with sickle cell, because they come into hospitals or medical facilities and they see a Black person and they treat them as though they're a drug seeker. And we want to have access that would eliminate that and give sickle cell patients the same access to treatment that cancer patients have. Many people don't know. When I ask women who suffer with sickle cell to describe the pain, those who have had children say it's 10 times worse than childbirth. And to have that pain, to be in that pain is something that I see. If you see your child go through this pain, you can't imagine. And then to go to the hospital and be treated less than is just unconscionable. We have other great legislation happening with infant mortality. More Black women are dying from childbirth than anyone else. I am making human trafficking my personal mission, that people cannot use, oh, I didn't know they were under 18 as a defense for a crime against young people. And the last piece is paid leave for grocery store workers and home healthcare aides. And many people say, why grocery store workers? Well, like many of you throughout this pandemic, I noticed that we didn't stop eating. We didn't stop going to the store. And there were always these people there to serve us. And many of them, if you look at the statistics, either contracted COVID and lost their lives or are still recovering from COVID. And I think that large employers especially should be providing them with the healthcare that they need. And paid leave is a huge part of that. People should not have to choose between coming to work sick or not being able to pay their bills. So those are a few of things on my legislative agenda, in addition to getting teacher pay above the national average and other items that the Black Caucus is working on. I just want to leave you with this. I know a lot of talk has been said about the governor and the majority in the House of Delegates, but I want you to know that people like Brother Hayes and others, Luke Torian, so many others have done tremendous work to ensure we have the tools to fight back. And we do have the legislative tools to fight back against some of the most egregious proposals you see from this administration. And we plan to use those tools. And I just have a personal request. What can we do as a community? And I think the most important thing as a community we can be doing right now, and this is not partisan, it is organizing Black and Brown parents. So those Omega U parents, organize them, make sure they know what is happening at the school board level, make sure they are engaged. Because if Governor Youngkin says that parents have a say, then parents have a say. And that's parents that look like me, it's parents who look like you. It's not just the parents who are singing his name and his praises. And we have to make sure we can organize those parents. We know how to do it. We already have the network. And I just ask you to go out and do what Omegas have always done, serve this community, lift up our community, and get our parents involved. And I'm happy to take any questions if we have any time.
Are there any questions? Okay, Delegate King, thank you so very much for your comments. They're very right on point, and I hope we are able to assist any way we possibly can to help make things happen for you. So thank you very much.
Good morning, Brother Fairchild.
Yes.
I did actually have a question for Rep.
Okay.
King.
Okay, go down, Stephen.
Thank you, sir. Hey, good morning, Rep. King, and I appreciate you bringing your legislative priorities before the brothers. I just had a quick question for you concerning support of you, families within the 3rd District or within Virginia for families that care for individuals with disabilities. I know that, sickle cell specifically is quite costly, with an average cost, per patient of, anywhere between $1,300 to $2,500 a month for care for individuals. And so what are ways in which that we can help support you in spreading the word to individuals within our communities, furthering the call or the need for the financially astute, I guess, or support therein of care for individuals with disabilities?
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a really great question. I think the first thing we can do as a community is talk about it. So many people with sickle cell feel unseen and unheard, and no one talks about it. I myself didn't even know I had sickle cell trait. And I had a family member say, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so had sickle cell, but they grew out of it. You don't grow out of sickle cell. It's something that's in our families. We have to talk about. We have to make people feel seen and heard. And I think the second part is to advocate with local government, with your boards and your city councils and your school boards to allocate resources specifically for students with sickle cell and for young adults with sickle cell. So with young adults, if you're suffering crisis, if you have a crisis once a month or you're hospitalized once a month, eventually you will want to apply for disability. Ask your local governments how they can make that process easier for those young people. Ask the school systems to set aside funding for support, for emotional support for young people with sickle cell, for help with parents who need to, a lot of kids with sickle cell, their parents have never completed the 504 plans to give them special accommodations at school. And a lot of times parents don't complete those plans because they're too complicated. And even things as simple as getting back and forth to the doctor's office, to appointments. The more we talk about it, the more people identify, the more people don't feel shame in sharing their struggle with the illness, the more community organizations can do. But I think there is a lot of opportunity at the local level to allocate funds to support.
Thank you, Rep. King.
Thank you very much. I understand that Delegate Torian is on the phone, so can we get him, Brother Torian?
So before we hit Brother Torian, I just want to thank this dynamic Delta brothers,
All
Sister
right.
Kathy King, the delegate. Thank you so much,
Thank
sister.
you so
We
much.
appreciate you.
And I think I see Brother Morgan there. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. A quick question for you. Are there funds throughout the state or locally here in Prince William County that we can get support of for our 115 kids that we are mentoring through Omega U right now? But we have mentoring throughout the state of Virginia, and I'm trying to get funding to support that. Can you assist with that or let us know?
Sure. I typically leave funding conversations to the appropriators. You know, those people who have been here for a very long time. I think one of them is on the phone, but but I do think
that's a really good answer. Okay.
Excuse me, he taught me very well. Okay. So I use leave those conversations to the appropriators. I will say that one thing I hear folks on the other side of the aisle talk about is public-private partnership. So, you know, hopefully if they're serious about that, there will be funding for the amazing work that you're doing with Omega U. We rely on that. I can't tell you how many parents in the school system who say, you know, my son is not finding his way, he needs help. And the first thing counselors will say is, have you signed him up for Omega U? So you all are providing a tremendous service to the Commonwealth. And I hope there is opportunity for some public-private partnership with that.
Thank you so much, Sister King and Brother Fairchild. If I might say so myself, we have with us our dear Brother Luke Torian has hopped on. And brothers, just know we are so amazingly proud of this brother who has shepherded us through a pandemic with amazing amount of surplus revenues. The Commonwealth has maintained this AAA bond rating, as well as we have taken care of our HBCUs in ways that are considered record ways when it comes to the funding of our HBCUs. With that, Brother Fairchild, Brother DR, we have our dear brother, Luke Torrey, Dr. Luke Torrey.
Brother Torrey.
Brother,
the
yes,
floor is
sir.
yours.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Please forgive me for not being on earlier, but I was traveling from Northern Virginia back down to Richmond, and when that happens, sometimes things just don't flow the way that you would like for them to. I think you probably want me to address what might be my legislative focus for this session.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Sure.
Well, I think what I'm going to be doing, a couple things. One is to continue to work to ensure that that our historically Black colleges and universities continue to be at the forefront of appropriations now that we have a new chairperson. But some things that we championed the last couple of years, I want to continue to work on relative to appropriations. And then I was appointed as the chairperson of the Minority Small Business Commission. And I have several pieces of legislation that I'm introducing that to address some of the concerns that came out of the commission in our meeting. So those are going to be my focus. And obviously, I have a couple subcommittees that I'm on. With appropriations, I am on the higher education subcommittee, which I'm very excited about being on. And then I'm on the general laws committee, and the subcommittee that I've been on for the last 2 years has been the ABC and gaming subcommittee. And as you all know, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're trying to stand up at least 5 different casinos in the Commonwealth. And part of my objective is to make sure that there's a minority presence relative to ownership in these casinos, not just us being vendors and being folks who help staff to clean these places and things of that nature, but to have a very meaningful role in an investment. So that is those are the things that I will be focusing on, and probably supporting some other legislation that will come forth from some of my colleagues.
Okay. Are there any questions for Brother Torrey?
Yes, Brother Fairchild.
Brother
Torrey, can you address the question I asked Mrs. King, a reference to funding for our mentoring groups throughout the state of Virginia? Is there, any funds that you know of that we can go after?
Right offhand, I'm going to say I do not know, but I can certainly take a look into it. And Brother Morgan, you and I can talk a little bit more about that. And then what I will do is get with the folks upstairs on the 13th floor and see if there are any grant money that we may be able to apply for. But I would certainly look into it. There may be some possibilities. I can't promise that there are, but we can certainly take a look into it.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for joining this call.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Brother Legends, question?
Yes, my question is similar to Brother Morgan's question, but it's on a different vein. It's funding for African-American historic landmarks, if you will. There's one here in Richmond that we're working on. It's called the Moore Street School Foundation. Called Moore Street School, which was built in 1886. The building is sitting there dying and falling apart. It was the first school built after Reconstruction for African-American students. And so what we're trying to do as a foundation is to grab that building, wrestle it from the city, renovate the building, and also to turn the building into some sort of, well, when I say some sort of community, we know exactly what we want to do with the building. But as far as the building is, well, to make a long story short, while you're looking for with what Brother Morgan asked for, can you also look and see if there's some sort of funding or grants for historic African-American landmarks?
Okay, let me share with you the best way to handle that. Since you are here in Richmond, I would encourage you to do 2 things. Reach out to your Senate representatives, and then you have at least 4 or 5 delegates that represent Richmond. Now, if you're talking about being in the city of Richmond, there are several delegates that you can reach out to share your interest. You can reach out to Chair of the Black Caucus, Chairman Bagby. You can reach out to Delegate Jeff Bourne. I know one delegate who is heavily involved with historic preservation is Delegate Dolores McQueen. And then you also have Delegate Bessie Carr. On some of these issues, like this one here that you're speaking of, it is important to have your local delegation advocating on your behalf. So those are some of the folks I would encourage you to reach out to.
Thank you very much, and it has already been done, but appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Brother Torin?
Okay.
Okay.
Brother Fairchild, I have one.
Yes, Brother Ray.
My raised hand always blends into my
Yeah, it's kind of
my
hard to
background. Yeah, and keeping in the same vein of funding, it's a subject that we talked about earlier in the discussions. Is there ever any types of funding, either from the Democratic Party specifically, or from the state of Virginia in general, for organizations that carry on nonpartisan voter registration, nonpartisan getting out the vote, those types of activities, people that have a heart for that? Particularly, I say that because I think that perhaps some of the Democratic candidates may have funds that they have left over from their election campaigns and things like that, that they may or may not be allowed to donate some of that to 501c3s or nonprofit organizations.
I don't think there's a particular statute that prohibits us from contributing to nonprofit organizations. I do know that there's legislation that we passed, and then there was funding that was put in the budget relative to the whole election process. But if you have a particular organization that you would like for delegates or senators to make contributions to, I would just encourage you to present them the information, and then give them the opportunity to join in and give their support.
Okay.
That's a start. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Brother Torin, thank you very much for your comments. You say you're on the road?
I just got to Richmond.
Okay, I was gonna tell you, be careful.
Yeah, just arrived and trying to make my transition so I can get over to the Pocahontas building.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for your advocacy and just the civic responsibility that you're committed to, and I join in with my colleague and brother Hayes in saying thank you for giving us this opportunity each year to join you all and to be a part of this dialogue.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I noticed brother Hayes or Cheryl, the one last person, Scott, is that that individual show up or not? Cheryl, you're very.
Not seen them, and Delegate Hayes just went to walk over to caucus that starts at 11.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that all of the legislators have probably started their walkover.
Okay, so we're gonna go into the break time. Brother Morgan.
Unless there's any questions for me. And it looks like Delegate Torian's still on the call.
Yeah, I'm still on right now, and unless there are any other questions, I'm gonna go ahead and jump off and make my transition over to the Capitol.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
all right, thanks.
All right. So brothers, again, thank you all for joining us today. We'll stay on the line here. We're going to take a break until 12 p.m. Now, if there are other questions or concerns or comments that's pertaining to what we discussed earlier today. So thank you all again. And Cheryl, thank you for helping and assisting in this, and Brother Hayes and Brother Fairchild and Brother Torian and all the delegates that came through. We really appreciate it. It is very important to us as a people, you know, as a citizen of the state of Virginia, and as members of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, that we stay connected politically and take care of our families and friends, and so that we are informed to do what we need to do to assist them and to get them out to vote.
The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms. The members will rise and be led in prayer by Nathan Decker, pastor, Chester United Methodist Church, Chester, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which will be led by the delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
If you're willing, join me in prayer. Great dreaming God, who calls dreamers and prophets of old and today, as we toss and turn without peace in our restless fits and bouts of sleepless, hopeless night, reflect your love in each of us to each one of us. Give us yearning for visions of peace and justice. Open our lungs so that we can breathe the sweet air of human dignity as we lead. Remove the apathetic apnea and slothful snore of inaction that denies us seeing one another as sisters, brothers, friends. Lord, sing to your children. Lull our anxious hearts into the embrace of one another. Hum the spiritual from the cotton field, whisper the nanyins from the rails, murmur the dirges from the bridges and pubs, and beat the powwow from the fields and the forests. Bring us to be a human family, Christ. Bring us to your rocking chair rhythm, that we might find shalom in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sir. Pursuant to House Rule 4, the Journal shall reflect that the following members have been granted permission to participate in today's session via electronic communication means. Delegates Bell, Delaney, and Waxman. The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board. Mr. Clerk.
Delegate Bell.
Present.
Delegate Delaney.
Present.
Delegate Waxman.
Present.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I have examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for Saturday, January 15th, 2022. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39 pursuant to Rule 40 are now in order. The clerk shall announce the first morning hour order of business, including any clerk's announcements and communications.
Mr. Speaker, I do not have any communications right now. The Speaker asked me to make two housekeeping reminder notes. For those members during the first portion of the morning hour who are going to move to adjourn in honor or memory, if you would be kind enough to give that information to us so we make sure that we're pronouncing the names correctly. It just helps expeditiously move through things without offending anyone inadvertently. In addition, Speaker simply would like to remind not only the body, but those watching in the gallery and beyond, mostly in the gallery, that pursuant to Rules 4 and 53, the Speaker is charged with preserving order and decorum and has general direction of the House chamber by virtue of in real time of what that means. We kindly ask visitors to not clap, stand, cheer, or speak out during the floor sessions. We appreciate you all's attendance here, but would like to have the work of the body continue uninterrupted. Mr. Speaker, now continuing with the first portion of the morning hour, those items are now in order that are displayed on the voting board, and the Speaker kindly asks you to use your request to speak button.
The delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Coiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, our invocation was led by Pastor Nathan Decker, who is the lead pastor of Chester United Methodist Church. He has been in full-time ministry for 18 years and has been serving churches in Virginia since 1998. His favorite part of ministry is community building. Pastor Nathan Decker was born and raised in the Ozark Mountains among curves, hills, hollers, and railroad tracks. And his adventurous spirit brought him to love the history, geography, and the people of the Commonwealth. He enjoys hunting, shooting, woodworking, hikes in the mountains, and long walks on the beach. And his lovely wife, Stephanie, would claim him as a great catch. She is a nurse at St. Francis Hospital here locally, and we know she's been working long hours during this pandemic. They have two wonderful teenage boys, Elijah and Ethan. And when my colleagues believe I am in need of spiritual direction, I'm happy to share his cell phone number, as I am proud to call him my pastor. I would ask my House colleagues to join me in a warm House welcome for Pastor Nathan Decker.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On page 5, House Joint Resolution 34, I move that go by until February 3rd.
Could the delegate restate the...
Yes. Mr. Speaker, House Joint Resolution 34 on page 5, I move that go by until February 3rd.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the purpose of an introduction.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us we have the members of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. Many of you have probably seen them coming through your office, and we have a few of them up in the balcony today. The Virginia Citizens Defense League, otherwise known as the VCDL, was founded in October 1994, first as the Northern Virginia Citizens Defense League and later becoming the Virginia Citizens Defense League. They've experienced enormous growth in membership and was incorporated as VCDL in 1998. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan, grassroots organization with a mission to advance the fundamental rights of all Virginians to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, including helping to remove some of the laws that even prevented Dr. King from getting his concealed carry permit after his house was bombed. The VCDL believes that the right to a free and to a populace and to restore our gun rights, you must use the citizens as the most effective lobbyist group, and there's so many citizens here today. With us, we have Philip Van Cleave, Pat Webb, John Pierce, and Bruce Jackson. And I just ask that everyone rise or just please give the members that are here a warm house welcome. Thank you so much.
The delegate from Chesapeake, Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for the introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, we have with us visiting the Capitol and on the grounds and even virtually today, the magnificent men of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated in the 3rd District, under the leadership of Colonel Conrad B. Morgan, our director. Across the Capitol Square and virtually throughout the Pocahontas building, you'll see these men, and they will greet you donning royal purple and old gold. Omega Psi Phi Fraternity was founded November the 17th, 1911 on the campus of Howard University by 4 visionary men, Oscar Jonathan Cooper, Frank Coleman, Dr. Ernest Just, Amos A. Love as well. The fraternity was founded by like-minded men whose steadfast resolve was to encourage Christian manhood and scholarly attainment. The fraternity's 4 cardinal principles, which every Omega man lives by, are manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. Mr. Speakers, members of the House, you will find these men as leaders across the Commonwealth of Virginia, which includes Virginia College presidents, past and present, the late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, Virginia Supreme Court Chief Justice, currently S. Bernard Goodwin, the Commonwealth's first African-American governor, L. Douglas Wilder, superintendents of public schools, principals, pastors, rocket scientists, astronauts, military leaders, teachers, doctors, lawyers, city managers, entrepreneurs, athletes, U.S. congressmen, and even Virginia state legislators like Delegate Luke Torren and myself. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, please join me in extending to the men of the 3rd District of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated a warm House welcome.
The delegate from Fairfax County, Delegate Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an announcement.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, most of you are not going to be surprised when I tell you that today is the first day of the food drive for Feed More. And you will have seen boxes around the Pocahontas. I am fortunate enough to announce that I have a co-chair on the other side of the aisle. Would you please stand, sir? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we are going to be taking names. Please bring by your canned goods, non-perishables, and you really don't want to allow us to indulge in shaming on the floor, but Buddy is really good at it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate. Pursuant to House Rule 30, the Journal shall reflect that the following members are away on pressing personal business and are granted leave from today's session. Delegate Scott of Portsmouth. The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
Second portion of the morning hour order of business is not applicable for today's calendar.
The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
The third portion of the morning hour is announcements of requests by members to have legislation go by for the day, and if any, subsequent motion by the majority leader. Mr. Speaker, there are several on page 3 of the printed calendar. Page 3. House Joint Resolution 51 is by for the day. Turning to page 4, House Joint Resolution 70 and House Joint Resolution House Joint Resolution 99 on page 4 is by for the day, and also on page 4, House Resolution 1 has been requested to go by for the day.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that legislation is announced by the clerk go by for the day.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore, moves that the legislation as announced by the clerk go by for the day. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The clerk shall announce the next order of business.
And the fourth portion of the morning hours is reserved for members' requests for points of personal privilege.
The delegate from Kilgore, sorry, I did it again. They're just going to name it Kilgore eventually, aren't they? The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, today over in the corner is the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. Today is the anniversary of the enactment of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. It was enacted, it was enacted on January 16, 1786. The Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom was drafted in 1777 by Thomas Jefferson in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and introduced in the General Assembly in Richmond in 1779. So you see it took a little while to get that passed in the General Assembly. The statute disestablished the Church of England in Virginia and guaranteed freedom of religion to people of all religious faiths. The statute was a notable precursor to the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And the statute for religious freedom is one of only 3 accomplishments that Jefferson instructed be put in his epitaph. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you'll join with me in celebrating today the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Washington, Delegate O'Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. I know that we've all been prepping for session for the last several weeks, and I know that many of us recall that euphoria of winning your first election and being so excited and getting ready to come to session. And we've all been doing this for a long time and trying to get our bills ready, trying to get our budget amendments ready, trying to figure out where we're going to live during session. Do we want the meal plan? Do we not? The whole 9 yards. But there's another entity that hasn't just been helping one House member, they've been helping 100 House members. And that's certainly our clerk's office as well as the Division of Legislative Services. It's all the stuff like office moves. It is a giant jigsaw puzzle over at the Pocahontas building, trying to figure out where everyone's going to be, trying to figure out where we're all going to park, trying to handle the parking of all of our guests that are coming to and from, IT issues, bill drafts, redrafts, all those innumerable requests that come in. But also specifically want to thank the clerk's office for the role that they played in the inauguration yesterday, because those things only come every 4 years. And it is a tremendous undertaking to plan any event of that size. I know we've all planned, little campaign events with 50 people or 100 people, and try having one with several thousand people with all the security protocols and all that. And I know there were a lot of entities that played a role in that, but I want to specifically thank the clerk's office for their role in solving the logistical challenges. I can only imagine how many thousand times in the last month that someone has uttered the words, "Ask Jay Braxton." But certainly the day came off without a hitch. And with all events, I'm sure that there was something that went wrong, but we didn't see it. And so that's the mark of a good event. So just in general, we want to thank you all for your professionalism, for your helpfulness, but also specifically for pulling off a tremendous event. So I hope my colleagues will join me in thanking the House Clerk's Office and Division of Legislative Services for all the work they've already performed to get session on track. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you indeed to our clerk's office. I never cease to be impressed with their willingness to take on any task without question or reservation. They are absolutely the best professionals in this business. The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
As soon as I get this mask from around my earring. Apologize. Mr. Speaker, and hold on one second. Forget it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, today on King's Holiday, we pause a moment to honor the legacy and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This past Saturday, January the 17th, Dr. King would have turned 93 years old had his life not ended abruptly 54 years ago at the age of 39. There are so many things that we remember about Dr. King. Generations have been told, some lived during the period, but I think all of us remember a certain portion of Dr. King's speech, "I Have a Dream." And that I Have a Dream that everyone remembers, it talks about that little children will one day, he hoped, would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. But many ignore the rest of the speech. It was about more than just treating people the same regardless of color. It was also about redressing inequity in our nation and making the reality of our nation match the promise of its founding principles and the fierce urgency of now to do so. He also warned us of dangerous repercussions of doing nothing. Dr. King, Mr. Speaker, dedicated his life, and he sacrificed his life to the issue of equity, equality, and justice for all. Dr. King framed his speech in the historic context. 1 century after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which served as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. Yet 100 years after the hope and the promise of that document, Black Americans still had not achieved full freedom and equality, but instead, as Dr. King said, was sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination, living on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity, languishing in the corners of American society on an exile in his own land. Today, we still struggle and fight for those rights, the rights that often leave us, and I guess others, wondering, why are they asking this? Why are they fighting for this? Why are they continuing raising this issue? And it is because we have not reached those dreams, not economically, not in the criminal justice system, not in the educational system, and not in health care. And even as we look at what we're dealing with today, I'm reminded of all of these things that Dr. King has said, because I've looked at just on Saturday and what I've read in the newspaper and on yesterday, how issues of importance, issues that we should be willing to stand up and support and address, how we want to dismiss those various things. Issues like critical race theory and an executive order to ban something that does not exist in the state of Virginia. We have to continue to struggle and fight. Fight for freedom and fight for justice and fight for equity. To put a finer point on it, King declared that there was the march that they had in 1963. It was a march to cash a check. He reminded us that when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men and women, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The march was to call out America for defaulting on this promissory note. Let me put Dr. King's speech into the broader context, historical context, the very conception of our nation over 400 years ago. The dates and events may be taught in our public education system, but not their significance in shaping who we are as a society, both in 1963 and today. 1607 is the year we learned that the England's first permanent colony was established at Jamestown along the James River. The rest of the story is that the settlement was a part of a business venture, the Virginia Company of London, to explore the land and discover how best to exploit its natural resources for commercial profit. And about 100 white men, Englishmen, established Jamestown on a land that was already occupied. Within the past 5 years, we have seen a resurgence of backlash to the gains made by African Americans, women, and other historically marginalized groups. This is slowly brewed, culminating in the election of Barack Obama and especially the election of Donald Trump, sparking reemergence of explicit white supremacists as seen in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017 and the January 6th insurrection. We saw it in the response to generational changes made in the wake of George Floyd's murder, again surfacing a call to ban critical race theory, a coordinated campaign to intimidate teachers, school board members, and prevent teachers from teaching a complete, accurate history of our nation. In other words, teaching the truth. So I would say, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, yet now is not the time to hide from our history. Now is not a time to retreat. It is the right time to teach generations about truth and consequences. I have never seen a time like this before that I can remember, where there's such a disregard for truth. Where are we and who are we as a nation and a commonwealth? Now is the time for the rededication of oneself to something greater than you and I, and that is to be purposeful in standing on principles such as Dr. King did. Standing there on principles that include respecting one another. My parents always talked about principles. Be kind to others, Dolores. Be respectful to others. Let your word be your bond. Keep your promise. A good name is better than riches. Always protect your good name. But one that stuck with me more than anything that my parents taught me, to always tell the truth. Be humble, but tell the truth. And I hear these words as a constant ring in my ear. This one, tell the truth. Even if it hurts, know the truth, because it sets you free. And along with many others that we have an opportunity to pass on to generations. So Dr. King was a man guided by a system that served the very essence of who he was and what he wanted for America. Those principles would elevate him to be one of the most targeted men in America, and sometimes the most hated. When he was gunned down, assassinated on the balcony of Lorraine Hotel on April the 4th, 1968, Dr. King's public disapproval rate was nearly 75% at that time. But he knew that he was fighting a battle that was visible and hidden. But his limited time on earth, 39 years, produced tangible lessons and profound messages for a lifetime. And those messages still ring, yes, in 2022 for each of us. All of which should encourage us to rededicate ourselves to build a beloved community. Dr. King repeatedly envisioned, as John Lewis would say, democracy is not a state, it is an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and a world society at peace with itself. So 50 years later, we still seek to redeem the promissory note of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution for all Americans and make the dream a reality. Mr. Speaker and colleagues, today is the day. It starts with me and it starts with you, making this dream a reality and shifting our priorities to achieve the beloved community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Hampton, Delegate Cordoza.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great humility and sincerity that I rise, knowing that I stand on the shoulders of others such as Doug Wilder, John Langston, and Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, who served in this very body, along with too many other great people to name. Today, we recognize Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. While many here, across our Commonwealth and throughout our nation, will provide remarks regarding his legacy, I hope we understand what we say, no matter how profound, well-meaning, or well-written about his legacy, about the legacy he left. If we do not live that legacy through our legislation, we fall short of his hope and his purpose. It is easier to cross our arms than to cross the aisle. It is easier to bury legislation before we build upon it. And it is easier to be partisan than it is to be a partner. Let us not limit or define our empathy according to a cinematic experience, but rather a willingness to embrace the experience of others. This is not easy, but this is why we're here. I will not quote Dr. King as many of us do, even though it's applauded. A repetitive quote does not relinquish us from the responsibility he demonstrated. He is known for many speeches, but his impact rests in his public policy that he constructed in a bipartisan fashion that benefited all of us through structural reforms. We have the obligation and the opportunity to do better. That's what the Virginians deserve. Anything less is an insult to their vote and a blatant disregard of Dr. King, as we reduce him to a symbol and a soundbite void of his substance and his public policy impact. In essence, his legacy is what matters, and it should inform our approach to policy, but more importantly, it should inform our approach to each other. I said I would not quote Dr. King, but I will quote his wife, Coretta Scott King, because of our obligation and opportunity to give Virginians a better Commonwealth. We have one thing in the way, and whether personal or partisan, that thing would be our opinions. Coretta Scott King made it clear, it doesn't matter how strong your opinions are. If you do not use your power for positive change, you are indeed part of the problem. So God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My dear colleagues, I do rise today in memory of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and the inspiration that his legacy and that it endures. When I consider that legacy and what MLK means to me, I'm always drawn to his words, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I want to share some history even at the risk of being divisive. Mr. Speaker, reflecting on the lessons I was taught in some of my public school history classes, I recall that some of my textbooks made mention to the slave trade. There was a few mentions here and there, and it focused on the glory of our founding fathers and how fortunate that they led the way. Yes, there are a few paragraphs, and maybe a few even pages on the civil rights movement, but I would submit that it was just a blip compared to the entirety of the text. But one thing I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that I distinctly recall open discussions about race and gender in my 7th grade civics class and my 12th grade government class. I was fortunate enough to have teachers who allowed free discussion and challenge us to reflect not only on ourselves, but on our experiences in the safe environment of a classroom. From what I recall, my teachers weren't facing losing their teaching license. From what I recall, a county that I was in was not facing losing funding. But most importantly, me and my classmates had an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and each other, the good and the bad. In some places, we have seen improvements since my time in middle and high school. We have seen a little bit more diversity and inclusion. We have seen that there is a desire to ensure our history is fair and accurate, not just from a singular perspective that too long has dominated the voice of American history. And as we've made improvements, the world itself continues to shift. It would take for a person to live in denial or put their head in the sand or just in their own little word to deny the murder of George Floyd had a profound effect on our nation. After all, most of us have seen the video of a man being killed by one who was sworn to serve and protect. Yes, there were protests, but what's more important, there was a national awakening. Most Americans either had reflective thought internally about what they witnessed, or they had discussions with their neighbors and at work. How could something like this happen in this nation? What did we do wrong, and what do we do to move forward? We are all interconnected, and we are a brother's keeper. As public servants and as legislators, we are the ones who ensure that the Commonwealth provides adequate opportunity for education and safety. Reflecting on Dr. King, it is important to me that people understand how I and others see what is playing out here in the Commonwealth. You see, we do want to move toward a dream, toward justice, but so far, we see echoes of a failed policy from years past. In the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, workplaces and schools started shifting initiatives and education courses aimed at countering racism and bias, recognizing our diversity, which is one of our strengths. Yet despite this, Mr. Floyd's murder and diversity training is now a beacon for some to divide us. In this country, since January 2021, 32 states have introduced bills to limit how teachers discuss racism and sexism. This includes 13 which have enacted some kind of restrictions on teachers in classrooms. It seems most of this is centered on the so-called divisive concepts. Mr. Speaker, what some see as divisive, I see as my life and what I have to live through, as many in this chamber. What is happening is not much different to what happened in September 2020, when a federal executive order was issued banning diversity training, like bias training in federal agencies. And now it seems that Virginia may be on the same path. I would juxtapose what we are seeing with the teachings of Dr. King. And yes, I'm going to quote him because this is very important that we understand that darkness does not drive out darkness. Only light can do that. That means conversations, reflection, and action. For the past 2 years, we've seen Virginia become more inclusive and a stronger Commonwealth. Now it seems we want to join 13 other states into what I fear is an abyss of controversy, banning books, ending conversations, refusing to look inward into ourselves and outward to our community. That will be a disservice to Virginians and a disservice to our future. Chilling speech on fundamental aspects of humanity will hinder critical thinking and will harm development of character and values. Mr. Speaker, Dr. King and many civil rights leaders sacrificed so much for all of us and for our nation, and we have all benefited. But for some reasons, it seems as just as we're headed for further reconciliation with our past and our present and moving into the future, and we're getting closer to a more perfect Commonwealth, some decided it would be better to steer us off course. Well, Mr. Speaker, I will not be deterred. In memory of Dr. King, for those who seek truth, we will continue to shine light to guide us to a stronger Commonwealth. For those who seek freedom, we will continue to work for every Virginian, no matter your geography, your race, your gender, your faith, your sexual orientation. For those who seek a clean and healthy environment, we will continue to fight for environmental justice to stem the tides. For those who seek protection for healthy children and safety for their children, we are here to work with you, and we will continue to promote the measures that keep them safe. Mr. Speaker, the Commonwealth has come very far, and I'm concerned that we have a very long way to go. But I do not stand here discouraged, and I tell all Virginians, do not be discouraged. Because, as you see, Dr. King did say that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it does bend toward justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Henrico, Delegate Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I feel like I have to start off with an aside, having heard the delegate from Scott's, the Majority Leader's speech about Jefferson and that glorious document. And I do feel a burden now that our bipartisan civics teacher caucus has gone from 3 to 2. We have to put a little bit more weight on our shoulders, Delegate Ware, to bring up the point that the delegate from Scott did note that Jefferson put that bill in and then sailed off to France and left it, right? And it took James Madison in his cool, dispassionate analysis in the Memorial and Remonstrance, which we should all read, and his politicking to get it done. And it wouldn't be the first time he saved Jefferson and made him look good, and it wouldn't be the last time. And so I think there's a civics lesson there, but really I just wanted to get Madison the respect he deserved on this day. And so I had to start off with that aside. But Mr. Speaker, I rise today, and I want to start by talking about where the new governor and I agree. Because we do agree on some things. And I'm going to start with two places where we agree. We agree that kids need to be in classrooms 5 days a week. And we agree that there should be high expectations everywhere. That we should be pushing children, having a rigorous curriculum, rigorous assessments, and getting them prepared, whether it's college, it's two-year credentials, or they're going straight into the workforce. We agree on those things. And so I rise to say that I'm disappointed with how the first 2 days have started, and I'm going to give 2 examples of that and hope that we can move forward with improvement. But first, I'm going to start with Executive Order 2 and masks. You know, a little bit of context, when we dealt with that bill last year and it came over to the House side, we put a bunch of extra public health guardrails in there. And those guardrails were put there for flexibility. We didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know where this variant was going to go. We didn't know what was going to happen. And we put it in there with the goal of keeping kids' butts in seats, keeping them in that classroom because that's where they learn best. And that was the point of it. And that ranges from, you know, it's kind of moot now, but we had language in there around vaccinations for teachers as an example. And so it's really disappointing that with Executive Order 2, we're doing the opposite of that, right in the middle of an Omicron wave. And this isn't just about To me, it's not about culture war issues at all. It's not about the mask at all. I can't wait to get rid of that thing, right? That's not what it's about. To me, what it's about is if we can keep even 5 more kids in my class of 30 in that classroom, rather than having them be out for 2, 5, 10, however many days it is, that's good. That's what we should be doing. We should be doing everything we can pragmatically to keep kids in school, because schools are no good if there's nobody in them. And right now, when we're facing a severe teacher shortage because they're out sick too, we've got staffing shortage, we have schools that are closing because they can't staff their schools. And so if our goal is to keep kids in classrooms and to make sure kids are learning, I would hope we would just do anything we can to make that happen. And I don't think that Executive Order 2 does that. The second thing I want to bring up is Executive Order 1, and we're going to have fights all session about critical race theory, and that's not really what I want to bring up today. What I want to bring up is that 8th number, and I brought this up in committee this morning, and I feel really passionate about this, getting rid of the math portal. Now, that math portal initiative, which got caught up in national clickbait news about advanced math going away, actually does the opposite. The goal of that math portal initiative was to create more pathways for more kids to have more rigorous math. The point was we could get kids on a trajectory where they could do AP Calculus if they want, the traditional advanced track. But it was also so we could get them into AP Statistics, which is more and more needed in the business world and in our economy every day. And it was also to get kids into CTE math that lined up with a possible job career pathway that they were taking. And so this was actually a way to diversify curriculum for kids, but to raise the rigor for all kids. And to see that eliminated when our ostensible goal that I've heard for a month now, heard on Saturday, heard this morning, is to raise standards, it baffles me. And so, I've been around long enough in teaching. This is year 17, and teachers joke about just the constant policies in and outs. Every year there's a new policy. Every year there's a new dictate from above, right? And Lord knows it's both sides that do it, right? But if we want to raise standards and if we want to keep kids in classrooms, I have no idea why we had those 2 executive orders we have. And so, when the rubber hits the road, right, are kids in classrooms and our high expectations going to lose out to politics and to the culture war? I hope not. I hope not. I hope we can bandy together to do right by kids, right? Right now we're batting 0 for 2. That's a bad average. I hope we can get that average up, but I fear that we will not, and that's incredibly disappointing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Sewell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I rise in recognition of the 114th anniversary of the founding of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The illustrious international service organization was founded on Wednesday, January 15th in 1908 by 9 women: Ethel Hedgeman Lyle, Anna Esther Brown, Beulah Burke, Lily Burke, Marjorie Hill, Margaret Flagg Holmes, Lavinia Norman, Lucy Diggs Slow, and Mary Woolfolk Taylor on the campus of Howard University in Washington, D.C. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is viewed as the first, and might I add, the premier Greek-lettered organization of African American women of high achievement. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated was founded to address the major concerns of the community by being of service to all mankind and to cultivate and encourage high scholastic and ethical standards among college women, a purpose which rings true to this day. Since its inception, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated has been a major force in addressing societal concerns of racial, economic, and social injustice. The sorority fulfills its purpose through its many programs.
In observance of the 114th National Founders Day, sorority members were encouraged to answer the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority National Call to Action by engaging elected officials in two critical issues: voting rights and Black maternal health. Following relentless national assaults on voting rights, members have been asked to ensure all Americans have free and fair access to the ballot. Additionally, members are asked to take note that Black women are more than 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related complications as white women. Moreover, pregnant women who live in rural communities are 60% more likely to die before, during, or following childbirth than women in urban settings. Today, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated boasts membership in excess of 300,000 worldwide, of which more than 8,000 reside in the Mid-Atlantic region, which encompasses the Commonwealth of Virginia and the state of North Carolina. Mr. Speaker, the oldest continuous lawmaking body in the New World is blessed to have 3 active members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated serving in its chambers. They are Senator Mamie Locke of Hampton, Delegate Marcia Sia Price of Newport News, and yours truly of Prince William County. Mr. Speaker, I ask that the House will join me in commemorating Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and its 114 years of service to all mankind.
The delegate from Powhatan, Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure for me to hear matters of history bandied about and discussed by a number of our colleagues, including those who, like me, have been in the teaching corps. And I would say, as we've heard about Madison today and Madison's involvement in religious matters, I would remind all of us that Madison himself would not have penned the First Amendment had he not been pushed himself, because, as we recall, he thought there was no need for a Bill of Rights, and said so in the Virginia Ratifying Convention, not far from where we are. But it was those contrarian anti-federalists, a couple of other Virginians, people like Patrick Henry and George Mason, who were the ones who insisted that we have that First Amendment. And so with that little note from Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for today, Monday, January 17th, 2022. The first order of business, memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The memorial resolutions to be adopted in block are listed on pages 1 through 4 of the calendar, with the exception of House Joint Resolution 51 on page 3. Turning to page 4, House Joint Resolution 70, House Joint Resolution 99, and House Resolution 1. Those 4 bills have been removed from the block.
Does any member desire to remove any additional resolution from the block? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting en bloc the memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table as listed on pages 1 through 4 of the calendar shall please rise. The resolutions are agreed to.
Continuing with the calendar, page 4, commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. The commending resolutions to be adopted in block are found on pages 4 through 7, with the exception of House Joint Resolution 34 that's been removed and taken by to February 3rd.
Does any member desire to remove any additional resolutions from the block? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting in block the commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table?
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I do want to, because I saw House Joint Resolution 44, and I know there were others who signed on, and I don't see their names, and so I might need to follow that, wherever that paperwork is, because it was turned in. And so I want to remove it from the block. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate McQuinn.
Bye for the day.
Without objection, bye for the day. Does any member desire to remove any additional resolution from the block? Pause. Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting in block the commending resolutions laid on the Speaker's table as listed on pages 4 through 7 of the printed calendar will say aye. Those opposed, no. The resolutions are agreed to.
Speaker, that completes today's calendar.
Per House Rule 51, the House has returned to the morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communication?
Mr. Speaker, just looking ahead to this afternoon's meeting schedule, most meetings have been canceled, committee and subcommittee. Appropriations has been canceled. Courts of Justice has been canceled and its subcommittees as well. House Committee on Finance, are you meeting? Okay. House Committee on Finance will be meeting in the House Committee Room over in Pocahontas at a half hour after adjournment, approximately 1:30. And then Appropriations, Higher Ed Sub also has been canceled, as has been Agriculture, Chesapeake Natural Resources. Chesapeake Subcommittee meeting is canceled, and Appropriations is canceled. So just House Finance Committee will be meeting this afternoon a half hour after adjournment, a recess, excuse me.
The delegate, sorry, the delegate from Caroline.
Mr. Speaker, my apologies. I just want to announce as well, Health, Welfare, and Institutions full committee and subcommittee 1 will not be meeting tomorrow morning.
HWI is not tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I will announce after the Governor's State of the Commonwealth the announcements for tomorrow morning, and now the calendar will be updated accordingly.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 3:30 p.m. May I speak to that motion?
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, for those of y'all who've back, you always recall that we have the State of the Commonwealth address usually at 7 p.m. Well, today we're going to have that at 4 p.m. So that's why I am moving that we stand in recess until 3:30 p.m., Mr. Speaker, and I make that motion.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore, moves that the House stand in recess until 3:30 p.m. As many as favor that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The House stands in recess until 3:30 p.m.
All right, I think we can come out.
Yeah. Brother Biden, go ahead and shut it down and bring up the regular screen. All right. Brother Fairchild, the floor is yours, and give your closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Brother DR. Brothers, I hope you've had an opportunity to see some of the things that goes on in the process of when we first start out the year talking about this is usually the beginning of the year for the House of Delegates and the Senate down there. And you heard some of the comments from the visitors that participated. I know that there are a lot of concerns in various areas, but it's a good idea periodically to come together and discuss them and then take appropriate action. Some people have been aggressive in their effort, and I would ask that as we pursue we're going through some really interesting times now when we start talking about voter suppression, we started talking about, the white supremacists. And so this is not a time for us to be quiet and sit back and not really be active and involved. As we come up on the election that's coming up here very soon with the midterm elections, it's really important that we get out to vote. Really, really important that we get out to vote. And every opportunity we can to engage in some kind of way to aggressively educate people. One of the things I found out, there are a lot of people who just don't understand how the government operates. And so therefore, when it comes to voting, they don't understand why it's important for them to vote. So it's really, really important that we share, get out, sharing information, even from a public awareness, raising all the issues so everybody understands this critical race theory that has been bandied about and misused and abused, and it really does not. The message that's out there is really not true, and you hear people talking about it, and the governor, that certainly present governor, certainly misused that word and misused the term. And so we definitely need to make sure that the truth gets out. It's really important. We've had a year of experience from the Trump era where a lie has been pushed and believed in so much that people have taken action on it. They say if you tell a lie over and over again, people will start to believe it. And so it's important that we who are citizens in this country, just like everybody else, to stand tall and be counted and take action. Omega Psi Phi fraternity having the opportunity to take a leadership role, do so. We should do so. I know we are 501c7, and sometimes that restricts the extra things that we can do, but fraternity did put together a 501c4, which gives us an opportunity to be more aggressive in certain areas. As individuals, you certainly can do your thing. But I would ask you, if you get involved when the opportunity presents itself, please stand up and be counted. It's really important that we are actively engaged. And I'm sure we will have certain activities that will allow us to be more engaged. So please come out and participate. I thank everybody for their participation today. I thank Brother Torin and Brother Hayes for sponsoring this effort for us, hosting this effort for us, certainly sharing a great deal of information. I thank all of those delegates and senators who came in and shared information. I thank our DR for his leadership as we have engaged in this thing. I also thank Cheryl Weddington for her role in helping to work with Delegate Hayes and helping us support our effort here today. So as we prepare for future efforts, I'm sure we'll be doing some more things in reference to assisting. You heard some of the things that are out there. Whatever we can support or help them with, or reinforce, or write your congressman, write your senator, write your delegate, write whatever to put pressure. I heard some comments made from some individuals who expressed that they're engaged. That's important. So it's an opportunity for us to really do something big here. So I thank everybody for their participation today, and we look forward to future activities. Thank you very much. Brother DR, I'll yield back to you.
Yep, and ditto, Brother Fairchild. Thank you to all that joined us. We appreciate each one of you all. So now, are there any things that we missed or any other extra comments? And then we're going to shut this thing down at 1 o'clock. Any raise hands? All right, being none, thank you and have a good day. Thanks, Cheryl.